Hello Internet Land, welcome to Missy's Imaginings. Today we have a project and I thought I would give a review on finishing up the last project we did. So this was for the third scale girl short jacket. So it looks like this, and I thought we would go ahead and show how it looks with the buttons all in place. I got the buttons and snaps all done so that now it looks more finished than when we just sewed it together. So it has little white buttons up the front as well as button snap closures on the cuffs so that it holds it shut and gives more of a finished look. And then I just paired it with this little dress that we also did in another video. It's simply a circle, and you cut out a neckline opening with a slit so it can go over their head, and then two openings for the arms, and that's all there really was to it. And then finish all your edges. So that dress and how to measure your doll is also on the channel and ready for you. So either of those videos are ready and available. The jacket pattern is on the website. If you're interested, you can go to missyysimaginings.com and either scroll down through the blog posts to the video and pattern post, or you can use the menu at the top of the site. All you'd have to do is click on the word menu, and then it'll open up all the available pages, and I have all the patterns sorted according to size, and then like artsy crafty things are in another page, and then the paper dolls are on another page. So you can go over there and check it out. Help yourself to anything you like. There's no checkout necessary. All you do is click on the PDF link for whatever project you're wanting. It will open the file, and you can either print it right away or you can save it to your own device and then print it later. So however you want to do that. I just know there's a few places where I've seen things that are free, which they are free, but in order to access them, you have to set up an account, and then you have to put it in a shopping cart, and then you have to do a checkout, even though there's no cost. But I don't like doing that. I like to click on something, open it, and then print it, which is what you get to do. So help yourself over there. These Rainbow High are a 1/6 scale. So that's where you will find all the patterns that are available so far for these dolls. It includes the ones we're going to be making today, which is the ball gown and the tuxedo. So I'm kind of excited to put these together. I cut them out quite a while ago, and I chose as my colors, let's see, we have to get a couple things out of the way, black and yellow. I don't know why. So to make it more fun, we have lots of shades of the yellow and lots of different textures that we're working with today. So for the black, we have some satiny fabric and some cotton. It's a little bit heavier, and so it has kind of a linen feel to it. Then for the yellow, we have some yellow satin, some yellow lace, and then two different types of a yellow linen texture. So one's a little more rough, and then this one's a little more smooth. But when dealing with things of a similar color, a lot of times you can have a lot of fun by mixing some textures and giving up more depth to something by having a different texture. So that's what we're going to try. And like I say, the patterns are on the website. They're available for free. So we'll switch up the camera so that we're looking at the sewing machine and get started on those. The one thing I will mention, since I have this all handy, in putting this together, and I will double check and put a little note here if this part is also on the website, but I'm going to be making a pleated version of the fella's dress shirt, because I was looking at the way I wanted it to be finished, and I decided I want this shirt to have pleats in the front. So I have extended the center front this direction and added pleating so that we're going to be doing that as well. So I'm excited to get started and find out how these are going to look when they're finished. I decided to start with the fella's dress shirt, and the main reason is because I want to see how these pleats are going to turn out. I'm very curious on my drafting choice to extend that and add the pleats, and I want to see how it's going to look when it's done. And then I thought I'd show, for anyone who's watched the channel a lot, you'll be very familiar with this, but for anyone who's new, I like to start with what I call prep sewing. So that just means putting things together that aren't actually putting the shirt together in its entirety, I guess, you know, like when you're actually assembling front to back and putting the sleeves in. So the first prep work will be to sew the collar, and this is going to consist of putting right sides together and sewing up one side across the top edge and back down. Then just trim the corners and the seam allowance so that there's not very much bulk. Flip it right side out, and then I may or may not top stitch it, and then basting the edge to keep it secure. I'll also go ahead and put the facing together at the shoulders, so it will be assembled like this. I'll move the sleeve out of the way, flip this one. So it will be assembled at the shoulders, and then I will serge around the outside edge, and you can also zigzag that on your machine and then trim away any rough raw edges that might fray. I just avoid hemming a seam on the facing because it adds more bulk underneath the shirt, and especially with dolls that are this small of a scale, you want to avoid any excess bulk if you can. So shoulders and then serge around the edge just gives a flat finish to finish that up. So I'll be putting that together. On the sleeves, I will be serging the hem edge, and then I will turn up the hem on the sleeves, and then I will also do a little bit of basting around the top shoulder edge that gives me some ease stitching when I want to fit it into the shirt. So that's what I do for my prep work. I'll get those out of the way. And then for the pleating itself, what I like to do is when I'm going to fold this fabric, to make sure that I have a straight fold, turn this over so both of our pieces are the correct way, and I just have a metal bookmark, and you can use a metal ruler. I would just try to find some rulers, here I'll pull this guy up, have a cork backing, so it makes it a little bit thicker. So I could use this ruler as well, but it's real long, so it's kind of awkward. But if you have just one of the small metal rulers, or like this is a ruler bookmark, then I'm going to lay it along the edge, and I will transfer my lines, but I'll lay it along where I want the fold to be, so then I will have a nice crisp fold for my pleat, and then I just pull it snug and then I press it. And so with my little iron I can press on the metal, and I know it's not going to hurt anything, where a lot of times if you've got a plastic, either the plastic is too thick or the plastic can melt under your iron. So this metal is real nice for pressing, and it doesn't hurt the metal, and it keeps your edges nice and crisp. So the other part of my prep work will be to mark the lines on just at the top and the bottom edge, and that way I can use the ruler to line those up, and then I'll fold the fabric and press it down, and then when I go to do the next part, it'll be folded. I can lay the ruler right along that edge, fold the fabric back, and then press again. So I like to use this as a pleating pressing tool, so just a little bit of a cheat there if you're interested. So I'll also get this pleated, and then I will stay stitch around the top edge and the bottom to hold the pleats in place. Sometimes people will actually sew down their pleats, which you could feasibly just sew this edge and then fold it like so, but then your stitching would show. And if you do the next pleat, you might not always hide that stitching. So I'm not going to be seaming any of those pleats. I'm just going to press them, and then once they're all pressed, we'll fold our pattern piece here. It will look like this. So it will have those 3 pleats in the front edge of my fabric, and then I'm going to go ahead and stay stitch up here on the top and the bottom to hold them in place. And then once the pleating is done, you'll see how that neckline will lay nice and smooth for your neckline, so it won't have that weird jagged part. So anyway, that's what we're going to do to start, and then I'll come back to the camera. The pleats are now done in the fronts of the shirt. So we have both the fronts done. There we go. So that's the pleating, and here's the collar. So I decided not to top stitch the top edge. It's small enough, I think that'll be fine. So here's my collar with the finished edge. Then here's the facing, and I went around with the serger. I wanted the linen look for the fabric, but I also wanted to see how it would be to sew such a frayable fabric. And it was a little difficult feeding this edge through the serger. Here you can see it's a little bunchy because the serging actually separated from the fabric trying to get ready to go around or come back around from this corner. So just to give a realistic expectation, if you're dealing with a fabric that frays a lot, you're going to see a lot of this wanting to come apart. So you're going to have to go slow and careful to use a fabric that frays. One thing you could do, it will add more bulk, but you could, on all your pieces, iron on interfacing and then cut your edges clean and then go ahead and work, and it kind of helps hold things in. But I wanted to actually experiment with just the fabric, so I did not do that. So the facing is finished, and on the seam allowances, I didn't serge or finish them because they will be hidden underneath and they won't show, and to have as little bulk as possible, I just left them as is. Then on the sleeves, I did serge the very edge right here and then just turned them up and hemmed the sleeve. So that's my hemmed sleeve, and then I basted along the top shoulder edge so that I can go ahead and pull this with just a slight amount of gathering. Here we go, and I just kind of move it up, and then when I put this back into the actual bodice, I will smooth that out, but that just makes it a little bit easier to fit into the opening of the sleeve. So it's just some ease basting there. So I did that to both of the sleeves. The next step will be to put the front to the back at the shoulders. And because this fabric does have a tendency to fray, I'm not going to serge the seam allowance, but I will press it open and I will top stitch them down to hold them in place. So then when I put the interface or the facing in, those seam allowances will lay flat against one another and just stay in place. Then once the shoulders are done, the job will be to put in the collar and the facing. So when we're ready to do that, I'll come back to the camera. Now that the front is to the shoulders here, so it's all top stitched, so these seam allowances are held in place. The next fun part on this tiny little shirt will be to put in the collar and the facing. So to do that, I'm going to try to make sure my hands aren't totally in the way. I have snipped the edges. Let's see if it'll show on the camera where you can see this little notch here. And then, so I've snipped the center back and then a couple more notches. just to make this more flexible. I've also snipped on the shirt. Of course, since it frays so much, it's hard to tell exactly where that is on the camera, but here's the center back where my fingernail is. So I'm going to start with putting the shirt to the back, matching the center back notch. Here we go. And I'll go ahead and pin that in place. And I want to keep my pin very shallow, but it has to go in a little bit deep just because this fabric frays and it's real fuzzy at the edge. But I want to pin this in place, and then I'm going to straighten out the neckline, and my collar will go almost to the very edge. It will just leave like a seam allowance, enough for a seam allowance there, and I want to make sure that it's the same on both sides. So I'll pin that, and then if I need to adjust, I can, but I kind of want to make sure that it's centered on each side. Then I will pin the facing. I might even base that just to hold it, and then I'll do the same with the facing. I'm going to open that up, and I have the collar sandwiched between the right sides of the shirt and the facing. Then once that's all in place, I'm going to sew up the front, across the neckline, and then back down the other front. So that's our next step to put this together, and it'll take a little while, I'm sure, because this fabric is so fragile, and I don't want the fray to go down into the bodice of the shirt. So that will be my next step, is in putting the collar and the facing into the shirt. Here is the little shirt so far. So the pleats are in, and I think I may make some adjustments so they can be sewn down just to hold them in place. And but still, I like how the front looks for being so tiny. So here's the front, and then the back of the shirt. And there was a couple little puckers around the neckline, but I really had to work with this like 3 or 4 times to get that sewn in there. So I'm not going to fuss about this one little pucker that's not quite a pleat. It's just like a little tiny pucker right here. I think it'll still work fine, because taking that out again, I probably wouldn't have any fabric left on my seam allowance. So here's what we have thus far. Now to put in the sleeves, and we'll open this up. We're going to put the sleeves with the right sides together, and I'm going to start, and I've stay stitched and snipped the armhole just a little bit, but here again I'm going to be very gentle, because with those snips this fabric wants to fray really bad. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the sleeve, and I'll start from one side of the armhole and then the other, and work my way pinning towards the center to get this pinned into the arm spot. Once it's sewn in, I am going to serge that edge just to hold that fabric in place and prevent any more fraying. Then once the sleeves are in, we'll fold it around here. It's gonna be so cute. So once the sleeves are in with the right sides together, I'm gonna sew the arm up to the underarm and then down the side. I'll sew that together and in one seam, and then all that will be left, it will be to do the little hem around the shirt. So yeah, it's coming together, and this fabric is terrible as far as how it wants to fray, but this is a good representation of using a fabric that frays a lot, so you know what to expect when you're working with it. And so yeah, we'll get the little sleeves sewn into the shirt, go ahead and hem it, and the neckline, once it's put together, I will go ahead and put the facing and sew it to the shoulders at the shoulder seam. So then that's what the inside of that opening will look like. So around the neckline on the inside will all be nice and finished. And there's a little bit of puckering on the facing, but because that doesn't show, I'm not going to fiddle with that, because putting that little tiny collar in was kind of a bear, to be honest. But here we go, we're getting it in there. And yeah, I think it'll be cute once it's done. And I'm anxious to see it on the doll. So we'll keep on going. And here is the finished shirt. So in review, I think I want to make the shoulders more broad so that there's more room between here and the sleeve. It does fit him. So, and I even was able to do the bottom snap over this other pair of pants, where normally that's going to be tucked in and underpants. But here's the back. Got the little collar there. It's got little buttons on the ends of the sleeves, and then just little bead buttons with 3 snaps to hold the front shut. And this fabric, oh my goodness, does it ever want to fray? It's still wanting to fray even after everything is finished and sewn inside. There's a couple inside seams that don't normally get serged that still want to fray, but it does fit, so I'm happy about that. And then before I there we go, and we'll snap this back together. So yeah, so I'm glad I didn't sew the pleats down, because in truth it may not have fit him had I sewn them down. So we need some extra room in the width of the shirt. So if you're going to be making this, you might want to be aware of that. Also, one of my sleeves ended up a little bit narrow. So when that happens, I use, oh, hold the camera still here. I use a little plastic bag, and I put it over his hand, and then I use that to thread through the sleeve so that his thumb doesn't punch a hole in the fabric, because sometimes they tend to want to do that. So, but all in all, here's the little shirt. So we got the shirt done, and next will be the, I'm not sure, I might work on the little girl's gown, just because I have a light color in my serger machine, and I might do all the yellow pieces before I go to his cummerbund, bow tie, jacket, and pants. So there we go. So that's what the shirt looks like. Now that we have the shirt done, I'm going to move on to the girl's gown, because I already have light colored thread in my serger. So rather than change that all up for the black, I'm going to go ahead and stick with finishing up items sewn with the yellow fabric. So the gown consists of 6 pieces. It's just a strapless gown, very simple, with an A-line cut. So we have the front, then we have 2 side pieces that we'll sew this way, and then a back piece, and these 2 of course will go on the other side as well, and then this would be the center back. We have matching pieces for the facing, so that the top edge of the strapless gown will be finished and will look nice. So these are the pieces for the gown. Then we have, let's see, I've got to move these out of the way here. Then we have the pieces for the overskirt. This is very simple as well. So we've just got some straight seams for the sides, and then the side to the back. So it will be very full. This will go over the gown just to add fullness, and it's totally optional, but if you want a big puffy skirt over the top, then this can go over the top, and this would serve kind of like a slip underneath, except for the bodice that's exposed on the top. And this is, let's see, the dress is a satin. Then this has like a rough linen finish, just to again have that fun texture. So this will be very simple. The waist will be gathered, and I have not yet cut a waistband, but I'll probably do that later when it's ready to have a waistband put on. Then the last pieces, well, let's see, second to last pieces, I guess, would be the bustle that will actually be sewn onto black. And the reason I did this is I want the lace design to show up well. So we have the lace will go over the black fabric just so it'll show up better, and this will be the bustle that will go at the back of the skirt, and so that will just be another little fun add-on. So we have all the pieces for the bustle, and it'll have like a gathered puffy bustle on the train. So the black is the actual train, and then this will be the bustle pieces that will fit to the train. So there we go. Then we also have a lace pair of bloomers, just in case you want to have bloomers. So that's kind of another optional piece. And then there is a little black over jacket, but I'm not showing that yet because it's black fabric completely, and I'm not going to be using the black thread yet until I actually attach, well, I wouldn't even use it to attach the bustle because the bustle's yellow. So there we go. So there's all our pieces. So we'll move some of this stuff to the side. And I think I'm going to get some fast things out of the way first. So on the overskirt, I will just be sewing all the straight seams together, just because it's just so simple. So it's literally just, you know, straight seams to fit those pieces together, and then it needs to be hemmed, and then I will baste and gather the top edge, and then cut a little waistband last, because I want to wait and see once it needs to go around the dress. I want to see if I want to have a waistband that will be enough width to go around other pieces, rather than just the waist of the doll, because then it would be too tight. Hope that makes sense. On the dress, again, here I'm just going to be putting all the sides together, matching up the sides. So we'll just start sewing all the side edges to attach all the lining pieces together, as well as the gown. So it's just going to be all these side seams. So it's not very exciting. It's easy to kind of go over. I think we'll have more fun once we start putting the bustle together. But anyway, so we'll get all these done, and then we'll come back to the camera. Here is the facing that's all put together on the sides, and I went ahead and just serged the bottom edge so that it would be finished. On the inside of the facing, I'm not going to finish out the seams, because once the dress is put together, the only part that's going to show on the inside is the finished section. So I will trim these a little bit more, but I'm not going to finish them. I just don't want to trim them too close, because then they can ravel. But I'll trim them a little bit. And then on the inside of the dress, of the gown, I did finish the edges, because once the facing is in place, the bottom part of these seams will be exposed in the gown. So I want those to be finished. So that's why these are finished, but these are not. So the next step on the gown is simply to go ahead, and I'm going to put right sides together and sew up across the top and down the side. And then once that's in place, I'll get this little tag, then this will close with right sides together, and I'll sew from the hem up to where the facing is, a little bit up into the facing, and then hem it. And then the gown just needs a closure. But it's that simple. That's all there is to the gown. Then on the overskirt, I have this part all put together. I have the seams finished because they are exposed. And then I have it gathered. But again, I'm going to wait to create a waistband after this is put together and on the doll, so that I can actually fit this to make sure that it's the right measurement. And then I've serged the hem on both of these, so it's ready to be turned up and hemmed when it's finished. So those parts are done. I just need to put this together, and then we can go ahead and start the bustle. The gown is now finished, and like I said, it's very simple. And then on the back for the closure, I just have some hook and eye closures. Then to get the overskirt ready, I'm going to use just some bias tape as a little waistband, and I want to make sure I have the gathering correct. So all I'm going to do is wrap around the bias tape, and this is just to get a measurement, just to where it's comfortably around, because then I'm actually going to have it tie in the back, so it's not going to have a back seam. So I'm just going to measure here that to fit around her, the skirt would need to be gathered to this measurement, which on my little measuring ruler here is at 4 3/8. So what I'll do is I'll open up the bias tape and find the center, and then I'll center 4 3/8 in the middle of the bias tape, and then I'll gather the top of the skirt to match that, sew it in, then close the bias tape over it and sew the entire length of the bias tape. Here we have the little dress done, and then here's our little overskirt, and I just put some gold embellishment for fun around the waist, and here are our little ties. And so it's just like a little, instead of just a waistband, it's actually just the actual bias tape that will go around and then tie in the back, and she's kind of stuck on her stand there. So this will tie and go around the waist, making this the gown and overskirt. And now to start on the bustle. The bustle will be pretty simple. It's not super complicated. The first thing is to go ahead and to attach the bottom to the bottom piece to the upper piece, and so that's just to sew those together so that we have all three pieces. Then I'm going to gather here and here, both of those, to match the width of the lines on the train. So I'm going to gather those and tie them off, and then stitch them on to the lines that are on here. So I'll transfer these lines onto the train. Then those will be gathered and stitched to the train. Then all of this will gather and make sure that it's not getting caught in the seam, and then the train lining will be sewn on top of the lace so that we can flip it right side out to produce our little lacy bustle train. And then we'll finish the top edge. So in putting this together, I have gathered along the top and those gathering lines, and a little on the bottom. So now I will go ahead and sew the stitching to, like, I'll line up the bottom and try to get all these little threads out of the way. I'm going to sew the gathering on the lines that are indicated on the pattern, as well as on the top, and then I'm going to take the sides, and they're going to kind of loop a little bit, so they'll come straight down the side, but then they'll loop and pucker just a little bit at the bottom, and then I'm going to tack all the way around the edge so that all these little edges are affixed to the edge of the train. So once that's all sewn in place, then I'm going to maneuver all this lace so it's away from the edges, and this piece will be sewn on top, leaving the top open so I can flip it right side out. And then what will happen is all the edges will be inside, and it'll be nice and finished on both sides with the bustle free to bustle out. So we'll take a look at that after I get that part done. Here is the lace all attached to the black. So you can see it's got the little puffy parts here caused by the placement of the gathering lines. So now I'm going to pull all of this gathered bit to the center and away from the edges so that I can sew this onto that top, but I'll leave the top open. Then I can flip it right side out to finish up the bustle, and then once it's all finished we can add the embellishments. In finishing off this little bustle, I wasn't going to put a tie, but then I decided, you know what, I think I will. Reason being, I didn't want to have to try to decide if I'm going to put the snap on the overskirt or on the dress, and because the closure is a very snug fit, I didn't know where I would actually put a snap. So what I decided instead was to go ahead and put the tie onto the bustle so that could be put on, and then when this is tied I'll just use a small knot rather than a big bow. So we'll tie this. Let's see here if I can get this tied on here. So not a big bow. Then place the overskirt over that tie. There we go. And then when we wrap it around the back, we can tie underneath the bustle for the underskirt. And that can be a bow or a knot as well, either way. There we go. Put the bustle over the top, and our dress is ready to go. So there we go. So there's the dress with the bustle. It's up to you if you want to have the overskirt have more of a closure. So that's kind of up to you and your own taste. And if you want these to actually connect, then the bustle can come down here. But there's the back bustle on the dress. So I'm happy with how that looks with all our little embellishments. And we'll pull that down. So that's our little gown thus far. Now I'm going to go ahead and end the video here, just because I have all the things done for yellow. And let's see if we can move our camera up just a tad. There we go. So I have the yellow pieces finished. These black pants were the ones that came on the doll. But so now with the yellow things all finished, we'll go ahead and now start into the pieces that need the black thread in my serger machine. And yeah, so we'll end this video here, and then when we come back, it will be the actual tuxedo, jacket, pants, cummerbund, bow tie, all the things that actually need to happen for the fella. Looks like some of her hair is coming out. And we'll get those pieces done. But in the meantime, here are the gown, overskirt, bustle, and tuxedo shirt for the Rainbow Shadow High dolls. So there we go. Until next time, happy sewing. Bye.